Actually, it's been not difficult to find speakers for a lot of our events, so much so that it's actually harder to find time on our calendar to host everybody that we want to. We always believe that everybody has something to teach somebody else. So from that mindset, it means that if we have 300 members, technically we have 300 speakers. Having some sort of outcome or like clear objective for each event is really important. For happy hours, we always try to say, if you can meet 3 great people at the happy hour, that's going to be really. I don't necessarily view market size as the sole determiner of our success. Then, as we grew to our first 100, most of it was through networking, through word of mouth, starting to, and I know we'll talk about this later, open up some of the workshops that we had to the greater public to show some of our offerings and use that to entice the next 100 folks to come in. Me and my EA are the only 2 people who work on this full time. We didn't even have a website until October of last year, almost a year into building our company. We had a Notion page where we had our wait list and an application form. We maintain a relatively robust LinkedIn presence. It's definitely part of our strategy. I try to post weekly, multiple times a week. To be completely honest, when I first started, I was pretty against, posting on LinkedIn. I was like, I don't want to be this influencer. And, there's a lot of LinkedIn posts out there. When I was first building out this community, I thought of myself as kind of like, sort of like a cruise ship director. But now as our community has grown, it's more so, I think of myself more as a switchboard operator.
Welcome to Beginner Maps, where we are on a mission to dissect what other community businesses are doing right. Today, I'm thrilled to have Tara with us. Tara is the founder and CEO of Ask the Chief of Staff, which is a membership community business for, as you can get, Chiefs of Staff. I'm excited to learn about your secrets on growing a professional community, Clara. Welcome to the show.
Thank you so much for having me here. I'm excited to be here and share a little bit more about our community and community building processes.
Amazing. So to start off, how would you describe the people who are joining Ask the Chief of Staff beyond them obviously working in a role of Chief of Staff? What else is common amongst them?
Absolutely. So to give you a little bit of an overview, Ask a Chief of Staff actually has 2 membership tiers. We have an aspiring Chief of Staff tier as well as a current Chief of Staff tier. And so for our aspiring Chiefs of Staff, it's exactly what it sounds like. It's people who are interested in pursuing a Chief of Staff role in their career, whether it's in the next 3 months or the next year. And what we do there is really focus on helping them prepare themselves for the role and help them find their next role. So we do things like interview prep, resume review, networking events. So aspiring Chiefs of Staff can really take advantage of this network and figure out what the next steps for them to take a Chief of Staff step might be. Then with our current Chief of Staff tier, these are for folks who are currently in the role. We have Chiefs of Staff that range from early stage, seed stage companies, all the way to large Fortune 500 companies. We also cover Chiefs of Staff at nonprofits, as well as some family offices and everything and anything else in between. With our current Chiefs of Staff, we really focus on helping them be successful in the role. So we bring in industry leaders who lead workshops. Again, we do networking events, both in person and virtual. And generally, we want to give them a community of peers that they can network with to share best practices.
Amazing. And how many people do you have across both of these peers?
Our community just crossed 300 members this year.
That's exciting. I love this. Congratulations. Now, tell me about the origin story. So how did you come up with the idea of the business that is now Ask the Chief of Staff?
Absolutely. So I'm sure a lot of founders also deal with this phenomenon where you're building something that you wish that you had or something that you are uniquely positioned to solve. So I came up with the idea of Ask a Chief of Staff after my own experience being a Chief of Staff. I was a Chief of Staff at a Series A AI company, and I started in February of 2020. So needless to say, it was a very rough time in the world. And while I was going through this new role, it was also my first time being a Chief of Staff. It was my executive's first time having a Chief of Staff. And so we didn't have very many places to turn to when it came to thinking of best practices and how to best work together. So when I first started in the role, I reached out to probably 20, 30, maybe 40 Chiefs of Staff on LinkedIn to offer to buy them a virtual coffee so that I could learn a little bit more about what they did in their role, how they were spending their time, and what it meant to be successful in the Chief of Staff role. As I was going through this, I just figured there had to be a better way instead of me doing all of these individual calls. Wouldn't it be great to have a community where this type of persona was already handpicked and you were able to jump into this community and network with all of these different people so that we could all share best practices together? Since then, I joined On Deck to become their program director of the Chief of Staff Fellowship. We grew that membership to over 450 chiefs of staff worldwide during my year and a half time there. And then when On Deck decided it was time to shut down some of their communities, I took a little bit of time before starting Ask a Chief of Staff because I still felt like the need for this kind of community still needed to exist. And there was still a gap in the market where I felt like I was uniquely positioned to help fill.
It's really interesting because you haven't been in this role for very many years. Like you started in 2020, and then now you're creating a community of other chiefs of staff.
Absolutely. I think the thing that's interesting about the chief of staff role is that it tends to be a short tenure. Most people do go into the role thinking it's going to be an 18 to 24-month quote unquote tour of duty. And that's because the chief of staff role is often viewed as a transition and a stepping stone into something else, whether that be an executive role down the line, the head of a business unit, founding your own company. And so it was a natural transition for me to move out of the chief of staff role. We had just raised our Series B, and the chief of staff role was changing a little bit. And using that time that I was a chief of staff is where I discovered my love for community. So it was a very natural transition to go from being a chief of staff to then building a community of chiefs of staff. The thing about being a chief of staff is that even though you're doing a lot of things and you're covering a lot of ground, there's still a lot of things that you don't know and a lot of things that you're encountering for the first time. So when it comes to building our community, I don't claim to have all of the answers, but what it instead I want to do is bring together a community of chiefs of staff from a variety of different backgrounds, and hopefully all together we're able to share knowledge so that we are able to create those answers and share a knowledge of the commons together.
I know this. I have so many questions about it, but the first one is that chief of staff is still like a very new type of a role, and that means it's very niche, and there aren't a lot of very many chiefs of staff around. So, do you ever worry that you're in maybe like a small market for your business?
I don't necessarily view market size as the sole determiner of our success, just because there may not be as many, let's say, chiefs of staff as executives or CEOs out there. I still think it's an audience that's worth addressing because of the power that a chief of staff can hold. And our firm belief is that every executive could use a chief of staff. So if we go by that logic, you think about how many executive communities are out there and are thriving and successful. If that's the target that we are reaching for, then I think that the total addressable market suddenly becomes much larger. It also means that we have a lot of education to do about the chief of staff role, which is something that we try to do as well, is that we try to share articles, newsletter issues, just general information about the chief of staff role to make it so that more executives are aware of this role and want to bring this person onto their team. So while it is a newer role right now, I like to liken it to what product managers were maybe 10 to 15 years ago, where product management was a very new title at the time, right? And it was a title given to people who wanted to stay kind of wide. They wanted to be able to take a look at the bigger picture or be able to kind of see the product from a 10,000-foot view, but then also be able to dive in to help project manage different work streams and things to push out a new feature or whatever it might be. And if we take a look at the trajectory that a product manager has taken 15 years ago, it was definitely less well known or less of a title. Now there's philosophies built around it, communities built around it, an entire kind of industry built around product management. And I do see that same trajectory for the chief of staff role as well.
Right? So you're thinking about growing the pie. That's how you're looking at it, the long-term vision.
Yes, exactly.
Yeah. Love this. And can you tell us how you got your first 10 customers and from there to 100 customers, and how did your strategy for getting customers change across these milestones?
Yeah, so for our first 10 customers, I reached out to chiefs of staff that I knew. I definitely tapped into my network, especially folks that I knew had been part of communities in the past and could already kind of attest to the power of community, right? So when I first started Ask a Chief of Staff, the community portion specifically, it wasn't because, I had this idea and I decided, hey, I'm going to go build this. It was very much responding to many requests that I had where people missed the on deck community or they missed a prior community that they were part of and wanted to build out that space again and have this common space. So the first 10 customers, I would say, presented them to me, and I used that as the inflection point to actually start the community. Then as we grew to our first 100, most of it was through networking, through word of mouth, starting to, and I know we'll talk about this later, open up some of the workshops that we had to the greater public to show some of our offerings and use that to entice the next 100 folks to come in.
Right, this is interesting. And were you like, was the community paid from the very beginning? Like the first 10 customers, did they pay to be a part of the community?
Yes, we have always been paid from the start. We never had any free offerings. What we did offer our first 10 customers was we offered them a trial to start as we got things set up. So they were kind of our beta testers, if you will, trying to help us work out some of the kinks and some of the things that, the login might not be working properly or the onboarding messaging could be better distilled. So, there was definitely a trial period that we tested with some of our first members, but, with the very, I guess, strong notion that they knew that they would become paying customers within a short period of time.
Got it. And what was the programming like for these 10 customers? I mean, I'm really curious about every community's very early days because the number one challenge is getting people to pay. And if you're able to get them to pay, then the second challenge becomes how do you create value in such a small community?
Yeah, I think for me, because I came from a paid community background prior, I think it's important to showcase what your value is upfront. If you start free, it can sometimes be hard to try to convert people over to a paid membership down the line because they feel like, well, if I can already get this stuff for free, why would I start paying for it now? So I've always started, and given that I'm a bootstrapped company as well, right? Revenue has always been top of mind. If we're not bringing revenue in, then we can't pay with software and tools and team to run this community in an engaging way. So with our early days, we were already able to prove value. Many of the folks who first joined, they had been part of communities that had run in the past, and so they had a understanding of what I could bring to the community. Also, in addition to that, we started at a lower price point, and we were able to grandfather people in. We recently raised our prices this year because we feel like we're able to offer more now. We have more offerings. We have things like executive coaching. We have facilitated discussions. We even are planning a multi-day summit coming up. And so, the price that we started with is not necessarily the price that we will stick with for the rest of time. As a community grows and we see what people are wanting more of, depending on what those offerings look like, it will change and the price will fluctuate over time.
This is a really good strategy. And what's your plan for getting to the next 1,000 customers?
Yeah. Right now, word of mouth and referrals are still a really big part of our business. We do find that we want to grow at a steady pace. So we're not looking to hockey stick growth or double our community immediately just because for the sake of doubling, right? Erica Wenger has a really great thesis on this about building elephant companies that I think that people should read if you want to put that in the resources, is that we want to build a community where people stick around. We don't necessarily want to, bring in, let's say, hundreds of members, give them all a free trial, but none of them convert. We would much rather bring in customers who are with us from the beginning, they understand the value, and they stick around for a long time. So as of right now, we're still planning on doing mostly word of mouth. I mean, to be completely frank, we didn't even have a website until October of last
Wow.
year, almost a year
What?
into building our company.
That's
And so I think that
crazy.
just gives, yeah, testament to
How did
how much we've been
Bid
able
send
to
people
do.
to?
We had a Notion page where we had our wait list and an application form. But if you Googled, ask a chief of staff, it would only really come up on my LinkedIn or it'd be a LinkedIn company or even our Substack. We didn't have a formal website until about October of last year that we decided was like our 1 year anniversary gift to ourselves to create an internet presence. And again, it just attests to the point that people were finding us, people were referring their colleagues and other chiefs of staff. And so they were able to find us without that website. And so now that we have a website, we're seeing a lot more interest come in. And who knows, we haven't quite decided yet, but Maybe down the line, we'll have some more paid marketing spend or things like that. So far, we've found that creating great content through our Substack and LinkedIn have been generating the leads that we want. And as we continue to grow, word of mouth has continued to spread. And we've even built out a referral program within our community so that people can refer other chiefs of staff in order to get a little bit of a perk for their next month's subscription.
This is, like the biggest testament to the fact that you do not need a website to get started. Like people would be like, even I've done this. I'm currently doing this with a side project I'm working on. Like I have to have the perfect website and I need to buy the right domain and have all of these things right before I even try to create value out of it. But I think, yeah, your story just says that you don't need that to get started and go very far and, just have a good validation of the business that you've been in.
Mhm.
Yeah. Okay. So one of the other things that you do that is really, really strong is your LinkedIn game. So you're very prolific about posting there, and that shows you have. I checked it last night. You had more than 22,000 followers, which is huge. So is it deliberate, like building out your LinkedIn presence and posting there every day, or are you more of a free flowing thoughts type of person?
It's definitely deliberate. I can credit this back to my on deck days where our VP of marketing actually ran a masterclass on, what it is to have a LinkedIn presence and a LinkedIn following. To be completely honest, when I first started, I was pretty against, posting on LinkedIn. I was like, I don't want to be this influencer. And, there's a lot of LinkedIn posts out there. And I was like, oh, I don't want to be one of those people that's always trying to like shill something or sell something. And I had this aversion to kind of being an influencer on LinkedIn, and I still don't really view myself that way. But what I find that is very helpful is that when you're able to share these things that people are interested in, you're able to create discussion around these specific topics, and especially with the chief of staff role, that help you determine where you want to take the community and the business. So, it's really been helpful for me to kind of see what people are commenting and see what people are interested in discussing, and using that to create better content to then promote, this content that we have, show us as an industry leader and further our business that way. So when it comes to, word of mouth, like LinkedIn is one of those like words of mouth, right? It's one of those platforms that you're able to share thoughts and share our perspectives on what we think the chief of staff role is. And because, like you mentioned earlier, we're still trying to increase that pie. There's still a lot of educational information that needs to be brought out about the chief of staff role. So if it's not us, where are people going to find it? And so that's why we maintain a relatively robust LinkedIn presence. It's definitely part of our strategy. I try to post weekly, multiple times a week, but I will say I don't have it down perfectly yet. And there's still a lot that I can learn about the LinkedIn algorithm that I'm sure we could do to create even better content or even more engaging content for people.
I think you're doing it right. You're doing it right now because you're obviously getting a ton of engagement in there. People are following you, and just maybe like following the numbers or trying to go after pleasing the LinkedIn algorithm might dilute the quality a little bit, or something that you might be afraid of. But I would just want to double click on something you said, that you create posts to start discussions, and those discussions help you inform your business decisions. What type of posts have you found? Like what do you think of when you try to create posts that can incite discussions?
Yeah, I think a lot of it is around what exactly the chief of staff role entails. I think there's still a lot of confusion around what exactly a chief of staff does. And so whenever we're able to post content around what a chief of staff does, how they're strategic versus tactical, how they best serve an executive, what do their responsibilities look like. A lot of those are taken really well, and people can agree or disagree. They can bring in their own insights about their experiences and things like that. Right now, there's also a surge in people looking for chief of staff roles. So, obviously, anything that's job related content is really interesting for people to engage in. Just recently, this week, we posted a poll and, we wanted to ask people what's hard about finding a chief of staff role. And the answers have been really enlightening. Like, I have my own hypotheses around what makes it hard, but to actually hear from the market and see what people are struggling with gives us a lot of ideas on how we can better expand our offerings so that we can better serve this job seeking market as well.
Right. Okay. Thanks so much. Thank you so much for sharing this and uh, being indulging me on this off track question.
Of course.
Okay, I want to segue into a masterclass. So one of the things that you're doing right with the after Chief of Staff community that other communities are not doing right or other communities they struggle with is having an event calendar that is filled, like absolutely filled with a lot of different types of events. So let's do a mini masterclass on that. How do you do that? How does your event calendar just keep on growing?
Absolutely. So, one of the great things I think about being a chief of staff is that when you go through this role, it is very lonely. And so, you're always looking for ways to give back, right? So, with myself, I created this community to try to give back. And I always say, building Ask a Chief of Staff has been healing my inner chief of staff so that, these are all the things that I wish I could have told 2020 Clara. And a lot of the speakers that we bring back are either current or former chiefs of staff themselves. And so they are more than happy to share some of their learning so that this next generation of chiefs of staff don't have to go through the same struggles and obstacles that they did, and they can move on to tackle the next problem. So it's been really actually it's been not difficult to find speakers for a lot of our events, so much so that it's actually harder to find time on our calendar to host everybody that we want to, because there's so many different topics that you can talk about when it comes to the chief of staff role, and chiefs of staff are inclined to give back, and they play a huge support role within their company, so playing an additional support role within the community seems like a no-brainer.
And I want to get a little more tactical about it. So, do you have a place in your community where you're like asking for proposals for events or calling for speakers, or how do people find out that they can even volunteer up to host an event?
Yeah, so we do have a mentorship pool. So we have mentors that come in, and as a part of their mentorship volunteering agreements, they do promise to do one workshop with us in the year that they are a member. So that's a pool that we can easily draw from. We can always ask, if there's anybody who's ready to talk about something. The other great thing that we have is a really robust asks and offers channel. So people will drop in like, "Hey, I have a question about this," or, "I'm struggling with that." And community members will drop in their suggestions on how to help out. Based off of those suggestions, it might be worth, bringing one of those responders in as a more fleshed out workshop. And so it comes, very organically from our community. We really haven't had to, pull teeth or anything like that. Everybody comes in with a set of different capabilities and abilities to share something, and we always believe that everybody has something to teach somebody else. So from that mindset, it means that if we have 300 members, technically we have 300 speakers, and so if we look at it from that perspective, we'll really never run out. Then again, from my own personal network, having networked with now hundreds if not thousands of chiefs of staff at this point, putting out the call to my LinkedIn network to see if anybody wants to share any of their learnings has been a really great resource to find our workshop speakers as well.
And what about the live events? So, you also have a lot of live in-person events happening throughout the world. So, is the process the same for finding organizers or hosts for those events as well?
Yeah, so for our in-person events, this was actually born out of our community members wanting to meet each other in person. And so wherever we have a strong contingency of folks, we think it's worth bringing people together. Again, it helps crystallize some of those relationships. Of course, being in an online community is great, but actually getting to see somebody in 3D and, talk about things over coffee or a drink, we find that really helps build some of these relationships even deeper. So We started off small, last year I think we did maybe 4 events, like maybe one per quarter, and mostly in our largest geographies in San Francisco and New York. That's something that we want to do even more of this year. So doing more dinners, doing more happy hours, and those are always great opportunities to bring some of our partners in as well. So it's always a great idea, I think, to bring people together in person. You get to meet people, even for myself, and so I really think it's important, just like in any hybrid company or remote first company, it's important to bring together your team to get together and meet each other in person. I think having a community space to also do that is equally important to build the community.
Mm, yeah, I like it. And do you have any, like, do you do anything to support the people who are organizing these in-person events, maybe in terms of, knowledge of how to organize or how to organize a successful event?
Yes. So actually, for all the events that we've organized in person, I've actually been at. So I have been the front runner or like the person spearheading all of these events. I do have an events contractor who helps me out on the back end with some of the logistics. But I think in our first year of business, I think it was very important for me to actually make it out there to be the host for these events to really show, I'm committed to this. This is what I'm working on full time. I'm here to meet our community members. In an ideal world, I think, yes, I would love to have more geography leaders and people in different cities who are the ones who are kind of helping organize. And I would love to, of course, show up to as many of these as possible on my own still, but not necessarily be the kind of spearheader. I don't know if that's the right word for some of these events, but I think it's really important when you're building a community and you are the face of the community to be at as at as many of these events in person as possible to show people that, you yourself are invested in making these a success.
Mm. If you were to, down the line, organize more events in which you aren't the spearheader and you had somebody else, maybe from your community, take up and take charge of those events. So, what would you want to tell them about running a successful event?
I would
Any
say
thoughts on it?
having some sort of outcome or like clear objective for each event is really important. For happy hours, we always try to say, if you can meet 3 great people at the happy hour, that's going to be really great. Or if you can come in with a challenge or obstacle that you're facing and somebody can give you some advice on it, like that's really great. So having some sort of clear objective is always good, even if it's just networking, right? Even if the happy hour that you're doing is like, hey, we just want people to network and get to know each other, that's totally fine. It doesn't have to be this like super, metrics driven objective. But as long as you have that clear objective in mind, then you kind of help set that tone for everybody coming into the event as well. Then I think you can have a very successful event that way. The other thing is, just being organized. I think this is like a natural kind of filter down from my chief of staff days. But, being organized, knowing that you have either a way to check people in or distinguish people, like for some of the happy hours we've had, there are other people who are patrons of the bar who come in. So how do you make sure that, the people who are kind of staying on your tab or part of our event are there and they know how to identify each other, right? Whether that's like a simple wristband or a sticker or anything like that. And so being meticulously organized, I think, is always very important with any event. Like you want to have a clear agenda, you want to have a clear outcome, and also a follow-up plan as well on how people are going to get in touch with each other after the event.
Love this. Which tools are you using for organizing these events?
Yeah, so we use Luma for event registration and then a combination of Google Sheets to do follow-up and mail merge. Yeah.
Love it. And who else is on your team? Feels like you're doing so many things. Yeah, a big team.
I'm sorry, one more time.
Uh, Asking who else is on your team?
Oh, I have a really great EA. So she runs so much of my backend and email inbox together. And then we do have a couple of small contractors who help us on a project basis as well.
Wow, yeah. So I thought like you would have like at least a few people working full time on this because you're doing so many things in this community.
No, we're very much still, a solopreneur business. Like I said, we bootstrapped. So from the beginning, we've always had to be very conscious about our spend and, we can only spend what we've made. And so, that's why I think it's also important to find partners and people who are also aligned in the space with you who want to serve the same community of folks. So yeah, we are a very small team. We are definitely single digits. Me and my EA are the only two people who work on this full time and everybody else is on a project basis.
Wow. Okay, then amazing. One more question for the masterclass. So you recently, I saw that you open up your community workshops on Luma for people outside the community to attend for a fee. Tell us about this strategy. Like, what made you do this, and how is it working out?
Yeah, we like to open up our events because we realize, not everybody is ready for a membership right away, right? It's not an insignificant amount of money that you're spending. And if your company is not helping pay for it, or you just don't have enough time to invest to spend in a community, then we don't want to necessarily exclude you from a lot of these learnings that could be very helpful to you as well. Or maybe you just have a very specific need. There's one topic in particular that you're very interested in and you want to be able to just come to a event on that and that's all you want. That's totally okay. So, we open up our events twofold. One, so that we can serve a greater audience, right? Not every single chief of staff, as much as I would love for every single chief of staff in the world to come join our community, it's probably not a likelihood in the next, 5 years, let's say. And so, we want to be able to still serve that greater chief of staff network and audience out there. So if they're able to drop in for an event, then of course we're more than happy to have them there. And otherwise, it's also a kind of a try before you buy, right? So let's say you're not ready to commit the subscription upfront, but you're like, hey, let me see what this is like. Let me see what one of these events is like. And if I like it, maybe that will compel me to sign up for a membership down the line. So it's very much a marketing strategy and funnel as well for people to get a taste of what it's like to be in the community. Obviously, it's just one of the many aspects that we are able to offer for them. But if they're able to try a little bit and it ends up being the thing that converts them over, then of course that's a win-win. And if not, then we know that for them it may be not the right opportunity to join this community, and that's also okay. I think it's a really great self-selection process.
Mhm. I think this just really falls to the high quality of your events because in order to open up a community event to an outsider and make it worthwhile for them to join in and feel like it's really worth the ticket price, that requires a well thought out event and a workshop. So I think it's really cool that you're able to do that and have success with this initiative.
Yeah.
So can you share like any numbers? How many people do you typically have at these events? What's the split between people who are like outside the community and inside the community?
Yeah, it really depends on the event and the topic. We have anywhere from 30 people to 80 people showing up. And yes, majority of them are members from our community. They obviously get to go to every single workshop for free, so it gives them an opportunity to engage with as many different topics as possible. So we're always very happy to see our members in the room and then a smaller subset of people who, kind of coming off the street, if you will, to find our events.
Amazing. I love it. Okay. That's the masterclass. So let's move on to a different segment where I want to talk to you more about the community building piece of it. We've covered a lot of it already, but I have a few questions that I am curious about when you think about communities. So, have you ever been afraid of your Slack space going quiet or questions going unanswered in there?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think that's always a fear. And so that's why I think it's important to kind of reach a critical mass of people within your community. This is totally just a wild number, but I always kind of think like 500 is a great place to aim for, just because then you kind of get enough people who are active at any given time of the day. The kind of additional thing is that we always kind of set this rule for ourselves that, like, if anything comes in through the ask and offers channel, that there's some sort of response within 48 hours, even if it's like, I don't know, or, I don't have the exact resource that you're looking for, but here's something that I Googled for you. Even that is super helpful. So We know that everybody in our community, most of our folks, they have a full-time job, so this is not the first work. Many of them are using Slack at work as well. And so we don't expect our Slack community to be as active as, like, let's say a normal work Slack, right? Where there's like almost always an unread channel. And if anything, we don't want it to be that. We don't want it to be overly noisy or people feel like, oh, there's so much to catch up on. I'm just never going to make it. So, like, why even bother in the first place? Like, we want it to have a good rhythm and a good click, but nothing too overwhelming. And again, like, that's why we want to bring in our mentors and other industry leaders, right? People who are more invested in offering than asking. And so that every question that goes posted can have some sort of response.
Hmm. Like, how has your engagement strategy changed from, let's say, when you had less than 100 members in the Slack to now when you have more than 300 members?
Yeah. I mean, I think the kind of great thing to see is that when we were first building our community, you definitely want to model the behavior that you want to see, right? So it's a lot of the time you're doing a lot of the question answering, or you're showing people how to use emojis in the way that you want them to use them, et cetera, et cetera. Now that we are, over 300 members, we don't have to necessarily model that behavior as much, right? Early adopters or early joiners of the community have kind of now become the models. And so it becomes this more like cyclical thing. So one of the analogies that I like to use is that when I was first building out this community, I thought of myself as kind of like sort of like a cruise ship director. It was like very much like directing people to, like, you should go to this activity, or like, based on what you told us in your intro, you should go to talk to this person. And it was very much this like cruise ship director type of role. But now as our community has grown, it's more so I think of myself more as a switchboard operator. So instead of me saying like, you should go to this thing, it's like, let me tag in some people who can help you out with this, or here are some people that may be the right resource for you. So it's no longer me providing the answers or providing the course of action, but really encouraging this community action together and building relationships outside of me so that the community can function more independently instead of me being the person to, like, really hold everybody's hand.
I love this analogy. And final question for what's one big challenge that you're trying to solve right now? So you can be as specific as you can, because I'll be sharing this with my own network of community builders and people who are building communities. So, you can have like the best answer possible after this continue. So what's the challenge?
Yeah, let me think about this one. I think one of the things that I am trying to think about right now is that we our community is humming along. Like, we have a good number, like a good amount of interest coming in. The kind of placement side of the business is humming along as well. I think I would love some thoughts and advice on what the next step is. Like, what exactly would be the next milestone that we're looking to reach? Of course, we have, certain metrics and the number of members that we would like to reach, and I can come up with a revenue target, but like, what does the next level of growth look like? And I would love to talk to people who've kind of maybe hit those milestones in terms of, okay, we have all the foundations in place now. Let's say like we've gone from 0 to 1. What does 2 look like? What does 3 look like? And, any thoughts around that? I would love a thought partner to kind of think through, because I don't think there's necessarily one right way of doing it, but I think I would like to know what are some of the different routes that we could take, and that would be really helpful in terms of helping us kind of think through some of these things.
Okay, you got it. Sharing it with my network, sharing it with every community member I know, and like get me the best possible. I think I already know like a couple of people who can be a good third partner to this one.
Amazing. I can't wait to yeah, hear more about it.
I love this. All right, thank you so much for being on this interview with me, Clara. It has been such a pleasure
Of
having you
course.
here and learning from you.
Of course.
Amazing.
Thank you for having me. Really fun.